Welcome to Pursuit Talks. Kate here.
Jonathan here.
And Sam.
We are so excited that as we move forward, Sam and I were starting to look a little bit too much alike.
Like each other.
And we realized that we had a phenomenal time with Kate.
In the last couple podcasts that we've recorded. And so Kate is now a permanent member.
Woo.
Co-host.
She is a permanent co-host. So now there's three of us that you have to deal with.
You're welcome.
I'm sure at some point we'll just have like a choir for a podcast.
Yeah, we'll just like keep on adding our friends that were like, oh, they did good. All right.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
We're really
Permanent
excited
member.
to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's fun.
We've got a fun topic today.
Yeah, we're talking about social media. It's one of my favorite topics. I think being a pastor, especially working at a church, social media is something I think about all the time and what types of things I should be posting and why. But to like get down to like the base level, let's talk about what are the social media accounts that we're kind of talking about that are things that people should be.
And even like, especially with COVID too, you know, part of the reason we made this podcast was to engage people who either can't physically be with us or it's safer to engage like virtually instead of physically. You know, social media already in younger generations, but even more so today, now more than ever, is important. And businesses, you know, literally hire people just for social media. Yeah. And so it's not only in our lives as like people, but also in the world and the way it's viewed as it's important. It's now its own realm of discussion.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I think sometimes that I will completely move on past another ministry or a business whenever I see their social media game is weak. I will just be like, look, I can't suggest somebody else look at this. I can't represent this. And it's sometimes hard to even partner with other organizations whenever it's like, you guys aren't holding a standard that is now essential to what we do.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And I think that's why this is such a relevant conversation. So let's list out the social medias. We've got the Facebook, right? A lot of our parents are on that.
And pretty much most of us as well. Not all of us.
Yeah, because it's part of my job.
So Facebook.
They were like, I wasn't going to admit that.
So Facebook, Instagram, right?
We have TikTok.
TikTok. I was just watching a TikTok
Twitter.
video. Twitter.
We're going to count like YouTube.
We are currently on
I guess
YouTube,
you can.
so I think we should talk
like
about
and
it.
Comment.
Yeah,
Shameless plug.
and you can follow.
Like, comment, subscribe, all that.
Yep.
You know, stuff that you see YouTubers say.
You can also like and follow us on those other platforms at Young Adults GCC on Instagram and Facebook.
This is just the social media plug section.
I guess so.
We're going to talk about social media. We might as well plug.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other social medias that we can kind of refer to. I mean, no one uses MySpace anymore. I said LinkedIn was a social media, and both of my co-hosts disagreed with me. But
I don't think we disagreed that it was a social media. We
It was
disagreed
an
that it
irrelevant
was
social media for this conversation.
if you're posting vacation photos on LinkedIn, then you do.
Then I want your job.
You do you. It must be nice to go on vacation, right? And have the time to post it on LinkedIn. Anyway, we don't really have like a specific title for this episode, but we do want to talk about, in regards to social media, as Christians and as young people, how do we go about posting, responding, and just a general, what is a Christian ethic look like when engaging and interacting with social media? Because social media isn't just you, it's social. There are other people, and whether your social media is like private, public, however you choose to personify yourself on social media, because let's be honest, it's not the real you, because you're not digital, you're physical, you're in person. Social media is a persona that you willingly or unwillingly portray yourself as.
And I think it's a good thing to note that the three of us grew up with social media becoming a thing. Like, maybe not you, Sam, but I remember before social media was a thing.
I was very young. I'm 24, so I didn't get a Facebook, I think, till I was 16, and that was like a point of contention. So I didn't necessarily grow up like a I guess people younger than us, Gen Zers, as they would
Yeah.
be commonly defined. Basically, at this point, someone born after 2000.
Yeah.
We could just safely say grew up with social media, whereas we grew into. And
We
from.
came of age as social media came of age, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great
So-
way to say. Like, for example, I didn't have a cell phone until my family decided to not have a home phone. And I know there's people probably watching who never had a home phone, or at least don't remember ever
What's a
having
home phone? Just
Yeah.
kidding. My parents still have a home phone. I never call it because they have cell phones, but they wanted a home. They have a home phone.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. So let's start with, like, what are things that are maybe either good to post or maybe things that we shouldn't be posting on our social media? Kind of like cannonball back and forth a little bit.
I think you should probably not post nudes on social media. It's an easy one, right?
Yeah, no revealing in that way. No revealing pictures.
Okay, good start. Let's not post nudes.
I also think it's important to note, like, not with nudes, but like people use social media for different reasons, and you know, some people think certain things are appropriate on social media, and some people think things aren't. And also, the way you're perceived is important too,
Yeah.
because some people will post an innocent picture, like this is very generic, of them on vacation, and people will be like, "Why are you flexing?"
Yeah.
And like the whole intention and meaning and perception is very difficult. And so this conversation we're gonna have is, and you know, if you're gonna comment on this video, you know, this is a conversation. It's not like here's a list and you break it or make it.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's ebb and flow too, because you know, people also grow in maturity, and sometimes they're not as mature. Like if you look back at older social media posts, especially of younger people, and me included, you know, some of my memories, I'm like, delete that from my memory, please.
I think that one of the things that I always like to remember for myself, and I feel like this applies to Christians in general, especially Christians who want to share the love of Christ, is that the way we are perceived is really important. And so, like, our social media isn't just ours alone, but it's our representation of Christ to the world. And so I think a lot of this conversation is going to be coming from that mindset that this is our way to minister to people. This is our way to just share Christ's love and to show people, you know, who Christ could be to them as well.
So I think to take a half step back with that in mind, as I've said before, I work one day a week at a large coffee shop chain that happens to have drive-throughs. And when I am working there, I often get put on headset to work the drive-through. And it amazes me how much people that I actually even know, people I've known, sometimes when they're talking through the box, they can become really rude, really nasty, really abrupt. They lose any ideal of like humanity, and it's because they're not talking to a person. And then sometimes I get to stand outside and take orders, and those exact same people that I see every day that I work, all of a sudden are nice and happy and smiling. And I think we have
before coffee.
even before coffee.
Drinking coffee.
And I think we have the same effect when we're dealing with social media, is that I don't have to actually physically see your face. I don't have to physically know you in the same way, but I can suddenly act harsh or rough, respond very directly, and in a way that I never would if I was looking at your face, because I would be able to see maybe the pain that it caused you, or maybe the embarrassment that it caused you.
Or the fact that you can talk back or interact back. You can't just block somebody in real life. I mean, you can. It's a restraining order, but that's different.
So like when we talk about like what's appropriate to post, I'm not necessarily going to say like, hey, don't post this specific thing. But what are you thinking about what you're posting? Why is your intention behind it?
Yeah.
And are you actually changing something, right? So I think about personally, being on staff at a church, it means that like from the get-go, political posts are out of the window. Like that's not separation of church and state, things like that. But beyond that, I also I don't think I would ever post political posts, because I've
trying to
never
be
seen someone's
divisive?
mind change
Yeah.
about a political issue on social media.
If you're gonna have a conversation with that, it's a conversation, not a a Facebook thread discussion. Maybe a forum might be a better way to do that. But even then, you know, like it's kind of like appropriateness, I think is the word that, and it's not like appropriate versus inappropriate in the sense of like we said, nudity. I don't think there's a list we have as Christians like do and don't.
Except for the nude one.
Well,
don't post nudes.
Yeah. But like, what's the intent behind it, and like, what are you trying to build? I think, you know, even in our lives as character, like, are we trying to build people up or pull people down? Or are we just trying to be prideful? Or are we trying to be humble? Sorry, I don't know where this was necessarily going.
So with that, so in case we have different opinions, what is y'all's views on maybe posting a political opinion?
For me, I try to define what is a political opinion, right? Because there's a lot of Christian values that I have that have become political things. And so some of those even I really think through, what about that thing do I need to say, and how can I say it that is going to help people hear what I'm saying and not just think I'm trying to push a policy or like shed light on who I'm voting for or whatever. Yeah. So there's like that piece of it that I think about. But then like, I'm not going to post my political views because of the nature of my job, I tend to have some influence on the way people think. And I would hate for them to start thinking the way that I think because of that. Or the opposite, where like they stop listening to like me, you know, ministering to them because they disagree with me politically, you know? And if this is a conversation, and I have these with a lot of people all the time about like where I stand on issues and different things like that, that's a conversation I'd rather have in person than on a social media platform, because I think it's going to be a lot more fruitful that way. And for me, I want it to be a conversation and not a attack on my character or me attacking their character, you know? And so those are some things I think about with politics and stuff. So
I think it's funny, we always joke about people being influencers on social media, but like in real life, you also are an influencer. And like in your instance with kids, and even I'm a teacher, I teach kids as well. Like, we have influence in person, and, you know, we joke about people with hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, subscribers, whatever you want to call it. They're also, in a sense, influencers too. And for us as Christians, as ambassadors for Christ, we have an influence, and we need to, like, we're going to be held eternally accountable for our influence and what we did with it. You know, like, we are to be good stewards. And in that sense, for me, you know, I do comment sometimes on theological things, but usually it's not on a friend or someone I know personally. If it is, maybe I'll leave one comment and then that might be it. Or if it's something that I do have to do this like weighing of calculating in my heart, like, is this worth my time? Because sometimes I've thought about it for like 10 or 15 minutes to put one comment, and I was like, man, I don't know if that was worth my 15 minutes. I mean, truth is truth, but it's not the way. The thing is that I didn't necessarily disagree with what I said. It was just, is this the right way of me approaching the situation and talking with this person? Because I could have just sent them a message. I could have made a comment, say, hey, I'd love to talk about this in person. I'll buy lunch or something. You know, there's multiple ways to engage people in the realm of social discussion, right? Forget social media, social discussion. And sometimes it's not appropriate or it's inappropriate to just have a Facebook debate or a comment war or a Twitter war, which other people have those things. I'm not on Twitter personally, so I don't get in Twitter wars.
So that actually brings up a really great point for me personally. Recently, I had a childhood friend post about getting engaged, which on face value, I saw engaged and I got really excited. And then it crossed into that post represented a political view as well as a religious conviction. And that is that they were married to somebody of the same gender. And when I saw that, I had a moment where I was like, it kind of hurt me. Not because I was offended, but because I was saddened to see that this person that I had grown up with in the church all of a sudden is walking a very different path than I think is best for them. I think that they're losing something that could be so great in their future. And the temptation to make a comment and say, hey, like, what happened or how did you end up here is really high. And even to send a message and say, hey, because like unfortunately, with the way Messenger has been so integrated in social media, we now have to kind of view that as part of social media, because I see tons of memes that are screenshots from Messenger messages, and they're like, look at what this person said. So I have to be careful, even if I try to send a private message, that whatever I say might still be taken and shared on social media very publicly. And so I had to pause for a second, and instead of instantly responding, I stopped and I prayed. And I ended up not responding in that time because, unfortunately, where I am in my life and where that person is, we're just not in the same place anymore. And I didn't feel like I necessarily had a voice in their life, and I tried to look through things, and it doesn't look like they're even showing any signs of being a follower of Christ anymore. And I ended up pausing from responding to that. But this is one of those issues where, yes, it could be looked at as a political, and it could look like something that we need to respond to because it is a direct contradiction of what Scripture says. But this individual isn't following Christ anymore. So saying that into their life wasn't going to change their mind. It wasn't going to change the decision that they had already made. So, like...
Can I, before we move on, there's another thing interesting that we were talking about politics, and I think as Christians in politics, we have this weird kind of ebb and flow with it. But a lot of times, and you mentioned this too, sometimes things that are biblical become political, and not in the sense of like, we need to fight for this. Like, sometimes loving people, like feeding homeless people, this is a perfect example. Feeding homeless people is a political issue. The government gets involved, they move people, they have laws that you can even get arrested for, like either giving money or giving food or in certain ways interacting with homeless people. And that's just very unfortunate because, like, as Christians, we're called to do the work of Christ. You know, love our neighbor, feed the homeless, take care of the orphan and widow, right? James says that's pure religion. But those things have become politicized, and it's a shame because as Christians, we're supposed to love people. We're supposed to, you know, do what Jesus did. In some ways, sometimes, that even some people very simply on social media posting about those things where as Christians we can do better about this, that it's perceived as a political stance. And it's unfortunate because it creates division when in ultimate reality we should be spreading the gospel, but people are like, oh, you're being political about this. And that's a whole nother topic and conversation, but it relates with social media because sometimes people will be like, I'm doing this with this ministry, and we're like, that's, you know, people will blow up on anything really, but it's just a shame in our culture today that doing the work of the Lord is somehow political.
Yeah, that's good. One of the thoughts I had was actually back in college, we had this app that became like super popular. I won't even say the name because it might have just been in my area. But the app was anonymous. So you signed into it.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
And it was anonymous, and you could just post whatever you wanted. I went to a Christian Bible college.
Yeah,
there was like
this was
150 people in the whole college, right? And so I knew everybody by name, and I was in leadership at the time, and I got on the app, and you had all of these people who were like objectifying individuals in our school or talking bad about professors or different leaders, and it was like
not Christ-like.
The epitome of not being Christ-like. Like, I think it was like, you know, the largest example that I can think of to myself of someone who, like, this is really who they are. You know, everything else has been like a front, or because they saw that person in face to face, they never felt comfortable saying it. But because now their name has been taken off of it, it's become a thing. And it actually, we were able to get it banned from our school.
Yeah, it was banned from Liberty as well.
It got very, they were just bullying each other. It was terrible. Like, it felt like a spiritual attack, just how terrible people were on it. And I think that's where social media can go if we forget that God has called us to be Christ-like and to remember that there's another individual made in the image of God on the other side of the screen.
Yeah, that's the perfect thing. So with that, we talked a little bit about how we respond to other people, but I think that that's a really important thing that we talk about is that when people post things, like, how should we be responding to what they post? What does it look like to respond to maybe something that we know is wrong? And let's limit it to fellow believers, because I think that outside the church, like, we're called to a different level of thing. Like, I know this is crazy, but love people.
Wow.
Period.
Love God too.
But
It's really simple. But
legitimately, if someone's living in sin and they do one more sinful act,
sinners are sinning. Surprise.
they need to be loved. They need to know what truth is, but you can't beat them over the head with it. So like take that side of the equation. Let's specifically talk about people that we know confess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, and they would claim to be a Christian, and they would act like they were devout believers.
Yeah. I think also, sometimes people will post different things. Like some people will post a lot of pictures of themselves, and some people view that vain, but some people don't, right? Or some people will post like vacation pics. I know someone personally in my life that they use Facebook as a photo album, right? They take lots of pictures. They like taking pictures, not professionally. They take pictures when they're on vacation, when they go out for a nice dinner with their spouse, and they don't necessarily post these pictures for people to interact with. They use Facebook as literally a Dropbox or online storage, and that's a good thing because Facebook has no data limit for you to post all your photos. And so literally I think they have a wedding album, not their wedding, a wedding they went to, and they took actually this was kind of funny, the photographers at that wedding got mad at them because they took a ton of pictures that were good, and obviously the people were paying those photographers for photos. Anyway, certain people use photos, and even some people will post, I like to be funny on my social media. I like to post a lot of memes. A lot of memes. I like to just make people laugh because that's who I am in a sense, in a person. I like hearing people laugh. I like making people laugh. I like laughing. I laugh at my own jokes. And sometimes people post social media pictures because they like the way they look, and they post it and they're like, that's for me because I look good. And, sometimes we blow up on people for different reasons or different because the intent and what they do or what we perceive is different. But for me, I like to be funny on social media. So sometimes I've posted things that I realize, oh, that was not what I meant, and people took it wrong. And sometimes I've deleted posts because I don't think it was honoring of God. But sometimes I kept ones that were a little spicy because I was inviting a conversation, and I'm going to stop talking.
Sam loves the spicy memes.
Yeah. He was showing me. I've seen 3 from him today. But so thinking about how do you respond to people on social media? How do you respond to fellow believers? One of the things I think about is before I comment or DM them or whatever, I ask myself, why? Why do I have a problem with what they just did? And if my problem is this self-righteous anger, I would never do that. I can't believe they had the audacity, the gall to do that. I've discovered about myself that's not a good place to respond from. And then that's the perk about social media, right? We can pause and think about it before we post. But then if I think to myself, I'm actually truly concerned about what's going on in their life. But I'm okay, this is a good place for me to be. Next question is, how close am I to them? Is there someone else in their life that maybe it'd be better for them to hear this from? Or, if this is something that I feel truly the Holy Spirit's asking me to post about, because I think the Holy Spirit will say things to you and tell you, give you permission, when to post, then that's one thing. But typically, I don't post to, people I don't know. But if there's someone that I do know, normally I'll call them up, or I'll, ask them to go to lunch with me, and I'll ask them that question. I know you mentioned that earlier, even, if people have an issue with something that you say doing that. But I've just discovered very rarely does a conversation go well over social media.
Yeah.
It's always going to go better in person, I think.
You always see those memes make sure to spend your time arguing with people on social media today. Don't.
So I think that we've talked a lot about theoretical, and I think that unfortunately in our vagueness, we end up in this place where we could be misunderstood of what we're trying to say. I'm concerned always every time we talk about things that we would come across saying something that we really don't mean. So for one, ironically, we're going to invite you to ask us questions. Leave a comment, send us an email. If there's something we've said that you're hey, what are you trying to say? Just reach out, because we would rather have clarity, and we would rather have the conversation to go that next step, rather than just being oh yeah, those people are crazy.
And we can always have a follow up to this as well. If maybe something we said was wrong or vague, or people maybe wanted more clarity
Or not helpful.
or not helpful.
So
that's what
with
this should be.
being a little less vague, but we're going to remain vague to avoid specifically saying things.
I think just to like honor people as people, we've been talking this whole time about how humans are humans.
Yeah.
To honor the Imago Dei within them,
Right.
I think it'd be good to not throw people under the bus and slander.
Where we are in
Our
history.
intent is not to slander.
No, right.
Correct.
So where we are in history, there are Christian celebrities. This means that they're getting more attention, that they are more in the spotlight.
They're put on a pedestal whether we like it or not.
Right. And so within the last short while, a particular Christian celebrity made a post.
And they got married, right? They were celebrating their marriage, which is a great thing, right? God ordained marriage from the beginning. Marriage is great. From what I've heard, I'm not married, so.
And with their marriage, they posted a photo.
A series of photos.
A series of photos, but specifically one that caused people to respond.
A lot of responses, over 10,000 responses.
And I will say what the specific photo was, because I think that that's important to the context of understanding that there might be some question of that point. And that is that it was a photo of this new wife twerking on their new husband, which I think that we have to stop and understand, like, cultural differences or different ways of looking at things, maybe even just an age gap of understanding something. That there's some of the response comes out of that.
This person was a millennial.
Right.
And some of the people who maybe responded weren't. And so there's that whole generational, cultural, international, even ethnic or gender understandings of what twerking is, right? Because that's what the person quoted saying that that was what was occurring. And so this person posts this picture. It's in a series of pictures. And this was posted a day after their wedding. And they're saying these were just some brief shots, right? So it's a day after. Maybe there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. Maybe there was some. We don't know. We're not that person. And so social media blew up. You probably know what we're talking about because I know many other people have talked about it. People have made videos on it. Discussions have been made up on it in person and online. But that was the original post. And then I want to say it was a couple days later, after all these comments. And there were a variety of comments. Would you mind kind of summarizing what some of them were or what the majority of them were?
Yeah, so I'll say, so first off, like, there can be an argument made on both sides about the original post. And there are some responses that necessarily weren't terrible, but most of the people who responded, I actually get more upset about, because things were said like, your marriage is going to fail because you were dancing like that. Your marriage is going to fail because you posted this picture. Your marriage, and you're like, whoa. As believers, we should be.
They started demonizing both the husband and the wife.
And we're like, as believers, we should be like the forefront of like standing for marriage. We shouldn't ever be condemning marriage. Like Scripture
Why would you wish for two people who profess Christ? Why would you wish for a marriage to fail?
Scripture even like promotes marriage once it's like, if you're already married and one of you is a believer and one of you is not, like keep that. Do everything you can to protect that. It's like, so if that's under Scripture of
Honored
protecting and honored.
And also, like, our job isn't to like go and like just take care, attack these people at a human level and like attack their character because of a post or like say like you are no longer worthy because of, and that's really what it was. A lot of the comments were just very, very mean and degrading.
And some of them were like, hey, you maybe shouldn't have posted this. This might be interpreted. And that, in my opinion, I think all of us here, like, that's a fair comment, right? Maybe there was some discernment that should have been made. But a majority of the comments weren't that, and there were some famous or other Christian celebrities who did comment on this because, social media is its own world. And then, obviously, popular people celebrities interact with celebrities. That's just kind of how even Hollywood works like that. And so, kind of moving forward, this person responds a few days later
Yeah, so Kate has kind of a breakdown. She's going to give us a kind of a synopsis of each thing. And what we're going to do is, because we do have 3 different perspectives, and what's beautiful is we don't actually agree on what parts are correct and what parts maybe were a step too far. Because we as a group believe that maybe the initial post was questionable. We as a group believe that the way people responded, some of them responded okay, but
really
most of
bad.
them
Most
we
people.
we didn't like. We felt like that was unbiblical, and we also believe that the way that he responded afterwards, some of it was okay,
Some
and
of it wasn't.
was good to say, and some of it really wasn't. But we want to be able to share all of our perspectives because we think that you have an independent perspective, and that's good.
And we're not. A lot of times we do agree, right? We agree on the basics of our faith, but we also have lived different lives, experiences, and views on different things. And so I think if we caged our opinion to one, I think that would just do all of us a disservice. But also, what's your opinion on, not just our opinion, but also what's your opinion on, what was said? If you don't know what we're talking about, then
That's okay.
you can just try and figure it out or Google it. I'm sure it wouldn't be that hard to figure it out.
So, to be clear, the reason we're doing this is not to like frustrate you. The reason is because
We want to honor the person.
we want to, yeah. And so, maybe not Google it.
It's up to your discernment. Use this discernment that the Spirit has given to you.
Okay, moving on. So this is kind of what they said. Started out with grateful for the gift of marriage, then goes into like a little bit about. He said that my wife was dancing on me, and twerking is not a sexual act. And then it goes on to the next point. Is it's saddening because there was people demeaning his character and the gift of marriage.
So let's start there.
Okay.
Because what are your thoughts on those 2 things?
Those 2 things. So my thought is that I went to school with a lot of people who dancing was a big part of their life. And so for them, I'm in a white kid from Iowa. Like, we did not dance in Iowa. But so I just want to say that too. So
Some
this
footloose action?
Yeah. But like, because of my friends that I know from like school and stuff, that this was like a big part of their life. Like for them, like twerking wouldn't be a big deal. And so like, I think there's a cultural difference there that I want to make sure that I'm aware of when I think about this. So for me, like, yeah, maybe not post it, but like if you want to do that at your wedding, I'd be weirded out to do that at a wedding, but whatever.
It's their wedding.
Yeah. So that's how I feel about it. Do you guys want to chime in with your opinions?
You or me?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I actually heavily agree with Kate on this one, partly because for many years I competitively ballroom danced. And yes, that's become more, like those moves and those things have become more socially acceptable. But at one point in time, they were viewed exactly the same way as twerking is now. And some of those dance moves are also reminiscent of sexual behavior. Most dancing, no matter how benign it looks, is remnant of sexual behavior. And most dancing is used as a form of showing your military prowess and your sexual behavior.
Your
like
sexuality.
That's what dancing has been part of for years. If it's not dancing for the Lord, like that's kind of what the rest of dancing has been viewed at for generations. So to criticize this one particular move is to like, okay, what, like really
It's
take a step back
changing.
and look at yourself and look at what you've done and how it might be similar, but just a little bit step behind that. Now, do I think that it was the right thing to post? I really don't feel like it was. I don't think there's other things that I don't think you should post on social media that I'm also quite comfortable doing with my wife or even just in a group of friends setting. There's things that I participate with or do that, as much as I know that it's okay, as much as those people know that it's okay, posting on social media offers an outlet for it to be a stumbling block for other people. Like somebody else seeing that twerking, like they might be like, oh, wow, that, I don't actually want to go into that part, but it could be a stumbling block.
For me, my opinion was that if he hadn't have said anything, then I think that for the benefit of the doubt, saying that it was twerking actually makes the picture more understandable. But to me, twerking, it's not a sexual act, but it is a sexual dance move. And I think that's predominantly based on dominant culture. I also recognize that dancing is very cultural. Like, I'm a history teacher, and people have various ways of expressing their culture, and dancing is one of them. I'm also Hispanic. Hispanics love to dance. They move their hips. Unfortunately, God has not gifted me with that gift of being a good dancer. And so, for some people, dancing is really important. For some people, it's just something that their culture does. To me, when I saw it, I was like, that probably should not have been posted. Maybe if it was a picture they printed out and kept at their home, right, to reminisce of their wedding night or their wedding day, their wedding itself, sure, right? That's a personal picture. And I have no problem with the picture being taken. I think my problem was that people saw it on social media and it could have given the wrong perception. Right? It, like Gunnar Jonathan said, an opportunity to stumble or a door to be opened to be questioned. Right? I think I would personally argue, is this above reproach? And to me, it's kind of leaning more no than yes. Right? Obviously, I don't know it all. I'm not perfect. But to me, I wouldn't post that. If I had my wedding day, I would not have posted that picture. Now, I get that picture was taken in a moment and I was not there, and maybe people thought it was hilarious. Maybe it was awkward at the wedding, right? It was a picture taken at a wedding. And that's obviously up to perception. So for me, the twerking, that was a no-go for me. I didn't find that. But that's not the only thing kind of in this, right? This is a reply. So what was the second part again?
Yeah, we may have to respond just a little bit faster to each thing.
Yeah. So the second part was, there was a lot of people who had like a whole bunch of negative comments. And, they said that, like, he said that's not Christ-like. And then he goes into this bit where he talks about, like, how important proximity is to correction.
So I'll say real quick, just trying to give it quickly. One, that it was definitely not Christ-like. There many people were definitely not Christ-like. Two, I think that people who are in proximity have a higher responsibility. And so maybe there should have been conversations that were had about maybe like, hey, man, that's not maybe the best idea to post that. But at the same time, I hold hesitation to say that I think that if you confess Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, other Christians are your family. And I'm not afraid to message my cousin whenever they post something. I'm like, whoa, did you mean to post that last night? I hope not. Like,
yeah.
So that's my short.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, and I think it's our generation too, we jump to like, oh, well, you don't know me, right? But I think, as Christians, we are responsible for each other. We're family. Like the Vin Diesel meme, I'm Italian. We're family. And, there's an appropriate way of approaching somebody. And if you want to, we have a podcast about confronting a brother or a sister. But a lot of times, people throw up that wall because no one likes to get called out on their stuff, right? And they're like, well, you don't know me. Like, that's a personal attack on them saying, well, you don't know, right? But also, like, you have to go to what they said was what they said right or wrong, right? In our podcast, we said one of the great motivators or ways for people to tell or embrace confrontation / correction was, do you actually have their best interests in mind? And that's really, are you loving, right? That's what Christ, Christ was loving to people he corrected because he didn't just want to see them burn, right? If he wanted to see them burn, he wouldn't have come.
Yeah, I think going off of your point, like, well, why do you want to correct a person? And if it's just to make yourself feel better about life, that's not a good reason. Why are you doing it? And I agree, it's definitely proximity is really important, and you have a higher calling proximity-wise for your brothers and sisters that are closest to you to call them out on their stuff. But I also think in some ways we do have an opportunity to call other believers out that aren't close to us. And I think that there's a way to do it. And even more so because there's no relationship, you have to be a lot more kinder and graceful to do it. And because how else are they going to listen to you? And I don't, for me personally, I don't know if I would have commented. I might have messaged them or something just because that's not necessarily a thing that I want to start a trend, and then the trend gets mean and nasty, and then I feel like it's my fault.
That would have been a lot of messages.
Yeah. So, and then the last part is they said, like, you know, for people to say these things that call themselves Christians, it's super heartbreaking. And then he says, that's all I'm going to say about that, but I'm going to continue to twerk. My wife is going to continue to twerk on me. And then there's like this smiley face emoji thing. And yeah, and that's how he ends it. And for me, for this part, you know, I don't think that part was necessary. I don't know. It was a little weird.
I thought it was honestly very prideful. Like, it was doubling down. I think a lot of times with people, when you correct them, like for me, all right, I'm not perfect. I try to be humble when I'm corrected. It doesn't always happen. It should always happen. It doesn't. And like, to me as a teacher, when I correct a student, you know, the students who I respond the best to are those who are in some way humble about receiving the correction. And I think that's just like, even as a parent, I'm not a parent, but even as like in most leadership structures, when someone is being addressed by leadership and they're humbly kind of accepting that structure, that goes way more to the relationship, and that's ultimately what it is. It's a relationship, than someone like very defensive and prideful about it. And, you know, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. And I think we can all be more humble. You know, that's my view of it. I thought it was very prideful. Was it or not? I'm not the only one who... I mean, ultimately it matters to God whether that was prideful or not. Like, that person's not answering to me on the last day. They're answering to God.
I think also to that point, real quick, just thinking about the post itself, is there was the beginning part was like an apology for making you feel that way, not apology for the post, right? So it didn't feel like in that post he was super apologetic about the post, just making you feel a certain way. And then the rest of it was like, this is all the things that you guys did wrong, but, you know, I'm still going to continue doing what I was doing before, is what I felt in that. And to me, like, what was the point of that post? Was it just to yell at all the people for commenting bad? Like, it feels like almost he doubled down on it.
It was a separate post.
For me, literally that last statement is what takes that post from like, this is questionable, I don't know about that, it's going a little bit far, to, whoa. Like, that's, to have a sentence that goes, that's not very Christ-like.
I'm gonna do
what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, do those sentences go well together?
What's that in the Bible? I'll do what I want.
And it was like, it's in that moment that's why, like, practically why we're talking about this now, is because it's that last statement that takes this from okay, so maybe he's not responding well to somebody who called him out poorly, to, oh, wait a minute, this is a questionable start that has a wrong response by other believers that then has a wrong response back to it. And we're called to so much more.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
And I think really what happened in this, right, is this guy is... There's so many people that have stopped listening to him, stopped listening to the things that came from, you know, what he was doing, what he was producing as a Christian celebrity. Like, he lost an opportunity with a lot of people to show Christ-like, and, you know, lost an opportunity to share the gospel. And that's what the biggest perk of social media is that we can use it to share the gospel across the world. And when we post something or when we do something that's questionable, that's going to cause somebody else to stumble, we lose opportunities. People stop listening.
And it's also the double edge of, like, you know, the bad Christian moniker, like, that we like to kind of talk about, but like, you can be a stumbling block for someone to the gospel. It's unfortunate. And, you know, a lot of times in person we hold weight to our words, I would hope. But even on social media we hold it less because, you know, this is a sense of anonymity, or I'm not actually yelling at someone in their face, you know. I'm just typing on a keyboard or on a phone. Like, that's, I think, why we don't think it weighs the same, you know. And, you know, people are flippant on social media. I know I have been. I know other people have been. But, you know, as Christians, we are called to a It's not easy, right? Our lives are meant to honor God, and honoring God is not easy. If it was easier, I think more people would do it. And Jesus says, count the cost, right?
Yeah.
There is a cost to it, and the cost is you can't just post whatever you want on social media, right? If you live in America, you are free, right? Freedom of speech, but as a Christian, you can't just say what you want. There are actions and consequences for your words eternally and here on this earth.
So, friends, let's leverage our influence well. That's what this all is about, right?
Well said. And as we close out, for one, like I said, we've said a lot today. We probably said something that was stupid.
Or wrong,
Probably. But what we're really trying to get to is we're not trying to point out this one person because of any reason other than the fact that it's a good example. Be careful what you post, because you have to remember that you're affecting what other people get influenced by Christ. Everything you post has an effect on your testimony. When you respond to other people, do it with love and with grace. And sometimes it's better to just be like, hey, I love that you post family photos. That's great.
I love your dog. It's so cute.
Right. And when we respond to people who have responded to something we did, because I get it. If someone responds to a post that I made that maybe I didn't realize had the effect that it did on them, I need to not respond out of anything other than grace and love. But as we are closing out today, Kate, what's our catchphrase?
Even bad Christians can go to heaven too. Did I say it right?
Even bad Christians go to heaven, yeah.
Which, fortunately, in our social media world, is a lot of us.
A lot of us. If you made it this far, thanks. We love you. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next episode.
See ya.